Even once you know what you're doing and you're asking for plans at about the right time in the texting sequence, most guys are absolutely terrible about the actual asking for plans part. And basically they make two mistakes. First mistake they make is dropping the plans in like a ton of bricks. It's just like no escalation, and all of a sudden like an anvil in a cartoon, it just flies out of the sky and oh, plans just dropped out of the sky. Right? That's not very effective. The other thing is guys tend to be really bad about the specificity of the plans. They try and get way too specific, way too quickly. And let me talk about kind of like what that does to you in the texting process. So girls respond to your text, she's having a good time, and then all of a sudden you drop in this very specific, very demanding request out of nowhere, and all of a sudden it's this massive spend of social capital. So if the girl really liked you, you may get away with it, but it just feels kind of icky. It feels like, oh shit, all of a sudden there's nothing being offered, there's this big thing being asked of me, and the automatic reaction emotionally is just to recoil from it and not want to like engage with it even. So a lot of times you'll just get silence, you'll get immediate flakiness, that sort of a thing. What you actually want to do is you want to build the plans more gradually, and you want to build the plans in a way that A, she's on board with every step of it and participating in a positive way, B, it's building social capital, and C, you avoid hearing the word no. So I'm going to show you in the next couple of videos exactly how to do that. All right, I want to introduce you to a concept called a yes ladder. This is something that's used in sales, it's used in like therapy, hypnosis, that kind of stuff. The idea is instead of trying to get somebody to say yes to a big thing, what you do is you get them to say yes to a bunch of little things that lead them up to that big thing. And by the time they're actually making the big decision, they've said yes so many times, they've agreed to so many little things, that it would be actually weird for them to say no to the big thing. So I'll give you two examples. One example is you're texting the girl, and out of nowhere you're like, hey, do you want to get a drink Tuesday night at Jimmy's Taco Shop? Right? That's like a very specific. She may or may not have plans at that time. It's very, boom, it's just right there, right? And what if she doesn't like tacos? What if she's allergic to cheese? Who knows? Whatever, right? So there's a lot of things you could object to. But on the other hand, if you ask that same question in like a few different questions or a few questions that get small yeses, that might work a lot better. Be like, first question might be like, or first ask might be some funny, cute text, and then so, are you more into tacos or wine, right? And she goes like, tacos, right? You go, cool, are you a fun, adventurous person that likes, going on dates with cute boys? She'd be like, yeah, sure, who doesn't like that? And then your third question is something like, hey, well, the third question might be, what's your schedule like this week? And she goes, oh yeah, I'm free Tuesday and Thursday. And you go, okay, cool, let's get a taco at Jimmy's Tacos on Tuesday. Does that make sense? So instead of doing it in one question, and it's a very like, she has lots of reasons to object to that question, and if she objects, you don't even know what part she objected to. Is it that she doesn't like tacos, she doesn't like you, she's not free Tuesday, who knows? By breaking it down, number one, you know what the specific objection is, but number two, you got this series of yeses, and by the time she says yes to the first three things, it's almost impossible to say no to the last thing, right? Do you like tacos? Are you free this day? Do you like cute boys? Hey, do you want to get a taco? Right? Once she said yes to the first three, she can't really say no to the other one. And the other ones, the first three, up until the cute boys part especially, are philosophical and sort of just general enough that even if she says no to it, it didn't really hurt you. It wasn't really spending any social capital, all right? And again, every time she says yes to you, you're actually building more social capital. So number one, when you finally ask the question, you're spending less. Number two, by the time you ask the question, you've built more. So you're massively increasing your odds of hearing the word yes, which is what you want to hear. So we talked just a second ago about how the word yes affects social capital and that it builds it and builds it and builds it. I want to talk very briefly about how the word no affects social capital. When you hear the word no, that is probably the biggest thing you can have that just destroys social capital, all right? So you want to avoid hearing the word no. Let's think about what the word no means. First of all, it means non-compliance. It means the conversation or the interaction has ceased moving forward and is now moving backwards. And for girls in particular, they notice the trend in the interaction more than they notice the interaction itself. So for example, with a girl, if the interaction is really good and it starts getting a little worse to just like pretty good, they view that as a negative and they feel bad about that interaction, right? Or they have like a best friend and they have kind of like just a so-so day with them, like, oh, it wasn't the same, right? They notice the trend. Whereas if the interaction kind of sucks and then it gets a little bit better, they're actually relieved and happy that it got better. And so they'll actually view that as a very positive thing. So they're not viewing like the absolute of how good it is, they're viewing the change. And what does no mean? No means a negative change. So for girls, it's a very strong reaction they're gonna have to that. It's a massive damage to your social capital. Also, it says that you asked for something and heard no, which by definition of social capital is losing social capital. Finally and lastly, when the girl says no, on a sort of logical, psychological level, she has to justify to herself all the reasons that she does say no. So for example, if you ask a girl and she says no, her brain, her subconscious mind is like, what are all the reasons I said no to him? Well, I don't know him that well. He kind of did this other weird thing. My friends don't like him. I'm busy that day. There's all these different reasons for the no. That said, if she says yes, she starts justifying all the reasons for this. Why am I saying yes? Well, he seemed really cool. He was cute. He was fun. It's just a drink, so it's not a big deal. And she's like talking herself into the yes. All right, so it's very, very important that you create a pattern of yes, yes, yes instead of no, no, no. And it's actually very, very important if you do get a no, that you don't follow up immediately with other questions that get a no. I see so many guys in text, they'd be like, hey, can we get together on Tuesday? The girl's like, no, I'm busy then. The guy's like, Wednesday? No, can't do it then either. Friday? And then the girl just goes silent and never texts them again. All right, because it's no, 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 fucking no more social capital. All right, so be very, very conscientious, building yeses, and very much, even more so than building yeses, avoiding no's in your texts. So when it comes to asking a girl out on a date, I don't want you to think about a close. What I want you to think about is a closing sequence. What I mean is, it's not what is the one text that I send her to ask her out on a date. Instead, think, what are the progression of texts that I send to ask her out on a date? And it can be the same ones over and over again, all right? So for me, off the top of my head, a lot of times it might be something like, things are going pretty well. I respond to whatever they said, some like cute, funny, quirky response or whatever, and then I follow it up with, so how does your week look? Right? Or what's your week looking like? And I find out what their schedule for the week is, right? And then they respond with that, and then I say, sounds good. How do you feel about drinks and witty banter with a cute boy? Something like that, or with cute boys. I actually make it general so that it's not even necessarily specifically about me. And no girl's gonna be like, I hate that, right? Or some girls are like, I don't drink. And then you make a different plan. But most girls are pretty on board with that. And then you're like, okay, cool, let's do that on whatever day they said they were free. And by doing it that way, by going through that sequence, you're making it go a lot better, right? Other things that I'll do along the lines of that is even when I'm first meeting them, I'm already doing a little bit of a closing sequence when I get the number, right? So I'm like, hey, you know what? You're kind of fun to talk to. And then I gauge her reaction. If she's like, yeah, you're cool too, then I'm like, yeah, you know what? Maybe we'll grab a drink sometime or whatever. Gauge her reaction. And they're like, how do we do that? What's your number, right? So it's 1, 2, 3, like sequence. You'll know you're doing it right when sometimes they close you. So if you're going through the sequence, you do step 1, step 2, and then they do step 3 for you, that's when you know you're doing it really, really well. Now, that doesn't happen all the time. Obviously, probably the majority of the time you have to actually do all 3 steps. But if that happens occasionally, it's a really, really good sign, okay? But I want you to not think about what is the close. I want you to think about what is the closing sequence. What are the steps I can take to lead them towards the close? And along the way, you're constantly calibrating. You're noticing how they react, right? You're noticing, suddenly, like if they're texting very positively and you start the closing sequence and all of a sudden they start giving you shit tests, that means pause the closing sequence, pass the shit test, get it positive again, and then start closing it. And remember, you only close off of positivity, all right? But think closing sequence, not close. Okay, so what I've expressed to you so far is sort of what I call the soft close. Instead of that hard, like all at once close, it's this gradual, nice, smooth closing sequence that feels good for you and good for the girl. Now I want to talk about one other element, which is soft versus hard plans. How specific should you make your plans? My opinion on this is that you shouldn't push for super, super, super specific, okay? Because the act of pushing for super specific is a bit needy. All right, think of it this way. If you were making plans with a friend you've known for 10 years, and your plans were, hey, let's grab a drink after work, and they said yes to it, you'd be fine with that. But most guys, when they say with a girl, hey, let's grab a drink after work, then the girl say yes, and then they'll be like, does 7 o'clock work for you? And the girl's like, I'm not so sure, or whatever. And then they'll be like, well, okay, cool, well, we'll play that by ear. Does this place work for you? And the girl's like, and it's so much like, the girl's thinking about, like, she's starting to think of it as an obligation, basically, right? Instead of it being this fun, adventurous thing that you're going to do with her, now it's like, we have a time schedule and a place, and if I don't make it, I'll be late, and he's expecting me, and it becomes an obligation. They start to feel negatively about it, and they're going to be actually more likely to flake rather than less. Because I know most guys, they want to get those specifics for their own assurance and because they think it'll make the girl less flaky. In my experience, it'll actually make him more flaky. Now, obviously, once you do have those firm plans, it's less flaky, but the process of making them, that's where you're going to get absolutely the most flakes. So actually, I believe in leaving it a little bit open-ended. okay, or at least leaving it open-ended and positive until you kind of like get to the point where you have to. All right. It also, by the way, if you've made everything super, super specific, especially if you make plans days and days before, which is a bad idea anyway, you want to make plans the day before or like the day of, ideally. But in any case, if it gets super, super specific and then it comes the day of and you need to check in to see if you're still on, or you haven't heard from the girl, there's no really good way to check in with her without it being super needy and try hard. However, if you had the sort of open plan where it's like we're grabbing a drink after work and then you can just follow up with, hey, I'm getting off at 7 or whatever, then it's totally non-needy for you to send that. It totally makes sense for you to send that. And so it gives you, you kind of have these like free texts that are like the scheduling text, these free texts to touch base with her that like your neediness card will not be played. Does that make sense? It will never be needy because it's just a necessary part of arranging plans. But if you use those all up and then you get to the point where, oh, I don't know if it's on, I don't know if it's off, and you need to send something, then you're like, oh shit, now I'm like, hey, are we still on? Why would you think you're not on? Do girls usually flake on you? It's conveying a lot of neediness, a lot of low value, okay? So I do agree in having the plans solid enough that they're like definite and on and positive, and solid enough that like you're not like massively nervous about scheduling the rest of your day around them. But once you're at that point, once you're at the point where you can vaguely sort of schedule your day around it, I actually like leaving them open for 2 reasons. Number one is, again, not being pushy and not being needy. Number two is giving you that option for more text down the road if you need to touch base. Number three, which is kind of a funny like turnabout on it, is that if you leave them open and the girl's really into you, a lot of times she'll start solidifying the plans, which is awesome. If she starts confirming, hey, so are we still on? Hey, are we on at 7? Then you know it's on. Like any girl that's sending me a, hey, are we still on for plans? Basically, I'm going to sleep with her on the date. There's like 0 chance I'm not. Because you know that she's anticipating it. She's making a big deal. She's looking forward to seeing you. You're golden. Okay? So the nice little extra on it is it gives her the opportunity to be the needy one on top of everything else.